chat. Move on fairly quickly to our first presenter.
All right, thanks, Phil. Did you tell us where the washrooms are in case we need that, in case I need them? Over there. So when you get, after you've had your coffee, you can go to the washroom, come back. Does this thing fit in here? I can just hold them? No? Does somebody know more than me? Is there another one we can put this in? Maybe that one. Thank you for coming. We'll just use that one. Let's do that. Yeah. And in case you're presenting and you don't have to hold the microphone. And now Kevin's going to come and just make things even better. My name is Henry Krause, and I'm part of the Mennonite Church BC Leadership Board, and I'm the ministry team leader for our Engaging God's World task groups. And one of the task groups is the affordable housing task group that Phil has talked about. So we're really pleased that you could be here. Thanks to the people who've taken time out this morning to come and present for us. I know there's probably at least one other thing you could be doing this morning on a sunny November rather than being in church, but we appreciate your time. And also those of you who are online, thank you for doing that. Because we're online, so if you're going to be presenting, if you're speaking, if you're asking a question, please use a microphone so that everybody else can hear you. Also, we're hoping to record. Yeah, if you could put it in for we're going to record this this seminar. So we haven't asked the presenters if that's okay. So later on, we'll ask you if that's okay to get your permission. Those of you online, if you're recording, then there's a thing you'll probably have to click. And then we can, if there's any of you concerned about that, we'll just make sure that you're not on the camera or on the image when you're doing that. So we've already heard our calling as Christians is, I think, simply to love our neighbor. And one of the ways we love our neighbors is by using the resources we have. And we've got lots of resources, people, buildings, money. We've got lots of stuff. So we're trying to figure out what do we do in relation to the crisis that we're facing here in the world we're part of. The process will be, I'll do a short bio for each presenter, and then they will be presenting, and then we'll have some time for questions or comments, and then we'll move to the next presenter. The first three presenters will be online on Zoom, and then after that, we'll have presenters here in person. If you're online and you want to ask a question, either put something in the chat or raise your hand, and our techs will check that out and be able to get that question to us. Coffee's around 10:30, but in the meantime, if you want a cup of coffee and some cookies or happen to use the washroom, you know where stuff is. We can bring coffee into the sanctuary. I think today we've got an exception. Who's the person who would be okay, we're good. All right, so you can bring a coffee in. You just don't spill it too much. All right, what else do we need to know? At the end of our presentations, we've got some time for where to from here. So then it's a matter of, we'll figure out what we do with that. What do we do with Mennonite Church BC? What do we do with your congregations? What do you do as individuals? Where does these conversations take us? So that's the sort of structure for today. No, that is actually the structure for today. So that's where we're going to go. So the first presenter this morning is Lisa Helps, and she's on Zoom. She's a former mayor of Victoria, and she's currently working as the Housing Solutions Advisor to the Premier for BC Builds. So she's going to tell us a bit more about that initiative coming out of the Premier's office. So Lisa, thanks so much for taking time to be with us. I know you've got other things happening today, so I appreciate your being here. So I'll give it to you, Lisa.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Henry. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be with all of you there today. I just want to start my remarks by acknowledging where I am today, which is on the homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. So we're talking about housing and we're talking about land, and essentially all land in this province at one point belonged to the nations, to the First People. And in Abbotsford, want to hold my hands up to the Stolo, Matsqui, Sumas, Kwantlen First Nations, and the Nooksack Indian tribe. So just wanted to begin my remarks in a good way. I'm going to share a little bit about the work that I'm doing, and I know there's time for questions at the end, which I appreciate, and I also have a question for all of you. So use this as a little bit of an engagement opportunity, if that's all right. So as everyone knows, the province through BC Housing has been delivering affordable housing and supporting affordable housing for many, many years, and that work is important, particularly in a housing crisis. So through BC Housing, there are programs like the Community Housing Fund, which provides ongoing subsidy to buildings, including initial capital grants. There's also the Indigenous Housing Fund for on and off reserve Indigenous housing projects. And to date, for the most part, with one exception, which I'll talk about, most of the province's programs have been focused on low income, supportive, subsidized housing. And as I said, that is really, really important because there are so many people in all of our communities across British Columbia who are struggling. And what we've seen over the past, I would say 4 to 5 years, and I know you're seeing this in your own communities, is there's a different group of people who are now starting to struggle. And those are the people who work in our communities and who keep our communities safe, who keep our communities thriving, who keep our communities moving. And I'm talking about people like nurses and teachers and bus drivers and small business owners and construction workers, all of those people, that are relatively, we used to think of as well off as middle income jobs. All of those people, or many of those people, are making incomes that are good, but that can't keep up with the housing market and housing prices, both on the rental side and the ownership side. And so the premier, when he was seeking to become premier, put forward this idea of a program called BC Builds. And again, I really want to stress that all of the other good work of the province will continue. But what BC Builds, as we build out the program, and we are still in the program development phase, this is really meant to be a program to begin to turn our minds to how do we take care of all of those people who are so important to our communities, essentially the essential workers in our communities, who themselves and their families are starting to struggle. And so that's really the target of this new program that we're developing called BC Builds. BC Builds, again, it's in development, and I've got a question for you at the end, as I noted, that will help with our program development. The bones of it, though, is, and you would have heard probably the Premier and the Minister of Housing talk about these things publicly, is to find and partner on underutilized land that wouldn't otherwise be used for housing without BC Builds. And so again, in our province, we have a number, hundreds of really excellent nonprofit housing societies whose mandate is to build housing. That's what they were founded to do, and that's what they do, and they do that very well. And there are also others, like churches, like legions, like other faith groups, like municipalities, school districts, health authorities, and others that you may be able to think of in your own communities that have underutilized land, like a church parking lot, for example, or a very large parking lot at a school, or a health authority may have purchased a piece of land to build a hospital, but has residual land that they haven't made a plan for yet. So there are all of these non-market or public or quasi-public pieces of land across the province. And we know that there are a lot that are owned by entities that aren't necessarily nonprofit housing societies, that may not have the capacity to unleash their land for housing. And that's really where BC Builds is starting. Looking for partnerships with any non-market landowners, from churches, faith groups, legions, cities, etc., some of the ones that I've mentioned, and then looking to bring the capacity of BC Builds to help. What are the first steps that we need to take? Okay, let's get a steering committee together and figure out what is the vision for the site that you're working on. Or would like to work on. And one of the, I like to think of it as kind of an innovative approach. And it's also a really, it's a beautiful approach because it brings people together in a new way. One of the reasons that development usually takes so long is everybody who's involved in the process comes into the process when it's their time to do so. So first there's the landowner, then they go to the city, they talk to the city, then they might go out and look for financing, and then they get financing, then they engage a developer, and so on. And that process, from the idea that we might want to build housing on our land to we've got shovels in the ground and we're starting construction, for all sorts of reasons, and it's not that anyone's doing a bad job, can take somewhere between 3 to 5 years. And what we're aiming for with BC Builds is not just more housing, but more housing faster. So in order to do that, what we've been doing on some potential demonstration projects we've been working on across the province is bringing everyone together into a circle, into an initial steering committee at the very beginning. So the head planner, the mayor or the mayor's office, the landowner, potential financiers, everyone who's going to be involved. And so everyone at the beginning helps to shape the project vision for that site. We set timelines that we're all going to work towards. And it's a spirit of collaboration and cooperation, and through those things, a spirit of acceleration, because again, we don't just need to build more housing, we need to build more housing quickly. So land and that facilitation piece is our key to BC Builds. Some of the other tools that we're looking at is the ability to provide low-cost construction financing to projects. So that helps with affordability. Looking to work very closely with municipalities to accelerate timelines. You may have heard in the news a little while back some work on building innovation. I think that there's, and again, I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts. But I think, and we're starting to turn our minds at the province to how do we accelerate once the project rather is through the approvals process. How do we accelerate the actual building of that building? And there's I think a real opportunity, and this is something that BC Builds will be working on with the province, to move some or all of the construction process to offsite manufactured housing, and starting to standardize designs. So every 4 to 6 story building in the province, and that's the majority of our housing stock. When you look at multi-unit residential buildings in the province, 90% of all apartment buildings are 4 to 6 story buildings. They're not big concrete towers. And so is there a way to start to standardize some of those building elements so that each church or each city or each entity that wants to build multi-unit residential or apartment buildings can start with some form of standardized design? Obviously, there'll be elements that architects will need to amend to make the buildings fit into the communities and so on. So those are the buckets: land, financing, building innovation, and faster development through partnerships with municipalities. In terms of roles for all of you, I think, and we've been having this conversation with Emmanuel Mennonite Church, is to have conversations with your congregation about what kind of intervention do you want to make or could you make in the housing space with the land you have available. And that really, I think, is a values discussion for each congregation. Some congregations may wish to use their land to serve the people who are in greatest need, those who are struggling, those who are coming out of homelessness. And that's a really, really important thing to do. Some may wish to apply for the Community Housing Fund, which is a blend. It's 20% of the units at shelter rate, so serving people who are coming out of homelessness, 50% of the units at rent geared to income, and then 20% of the units near market. And again, that gives you a blend. And then a third option is to partner, once it's up and running, with BC Builds, to use your land to support people in the community who are struggling, who you see when you go to the hospital, who you see when you go into a small business, who you see if they're coming to put out a fire or any other of the community safety folks in our communities. So that, I guess, the BC Builds is providing or will be providing that third option. So there's supportive housing, and then there's community housing fund, and soon, hopefully, we don't know when yet, but hopefully early in the new year, we'll have this BC Builds option. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm happy to answer questions. Again, I've shared basically everything that I know so far about BC Builds, but if there's something that I haven't shared that you're curious about, one of the things that I'd love to know from everyone there is, what are the challenges? If you're a church community, you've got property, what are the challenges that you're facing in terms of taking it from an idea? Okay, we want to develop housing. What are the barriers that you're facing in doing so? So thank you to Henry and Phil, and I will leave it there, and happy to answer questions and hear your comments as well.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for giving us that picture from the provincial government place. Are there any questions or comments for Lisa? Any responses to what she's asked? So why don't we get this microphone to you? We'll take it off this fan.
Hi, my name is Irene Duickman. I'm a member here at Emmanuel Mennonite Church. I guess the big question in my head is, because we are a diminishing congregation with smaller numbers, especially since COVID, we need, before we can make even really an emotional commitment, we need to have a bit of an idea of the money and how much money we as a congregation need to put up for this. And then once the housing is established, do we actually receive back income for the fact that we've given our land for this project? And I guess our money involvement, as well as our sort of ongoing responsibility to the people and to the housing project once it has been established.
It's a good question. You want to respond to that, Lisa?
Sure. Yes. So I think some of those questions are questions for the church and the congregation. So there are a number of models, and so if you want to use your land for housing that's going to support people coming out of homelessness, or community housing fund, those programs both come with an ongoing operating subsidy for the building, so that it won't necessarily be a money maker for the church per se, but there's ongoing operating subsidy to help cover the costs of the building, because some of the rents are very low. So that's one option. With BC Builds, because we're targeting a middle income audience, again, and if the church retains ownership of the building and wants to run it or contract out with a private property owner to do the actual work of choosing tenants and cleaning hallways and this and that, over time, there probably is a source of revenue for the church, because as the mortgage is paid off, as the principal and interest are paid down, there is more income available, and that income can do a number of things. It can go back into the building to continue to make rents lower, which isn't a condition of BC Builds, or it can come into the church to do whatever the church needs. But it's a bit of a longer term approach. In terms of what funding is available through BC Builds, that we don't know yet. Again, because it's a middle income program, there's kind of a philosophy in government that most public money should go to build housing for people who are really in dire straits. And it may be the case, once we do some more number crunching, that unless there is some kind of cash injection even into middle income housing projects, they may not get started at all because of high interest rates, because of construction costs. So in terms of the money, grants or equity or forgivable loans or whatever kind of mechanism that might be available for BC Builds, we don't know yet. We're not that far along in program development. I hope I answered the other part of the question well.
That's helpful for now. We are fortunate today. We do have a couple of organizations that do housing already, so they can help think through some of those things of how funding happens. We also have someone who's working in the area of fundraising. So there's a variety of people that will speak to some of those questions around funding, but that's a huge issue. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank the church for putting this on. My name's Len Stein, and I'm from Gladwin Heights United Church, and we are just going through this process. We have applied to the city for rezoning, and they figure that we will have our rezoning sometime by the end of this year or in the beginning. We have done all of the pre-work, but our hope is to be able to take our church land that we have and still have a congregation on the bottom of it. We have two other congregations that want space in there. We have Wind and Tide that has a preschool, and then they want to do daycare. And then we have also partnered with the MSA community here, which looks after individuals that are challenged. They want 2 floors for training. And then we would be able to put 59 units of low-income housing on the top. Does that fall within the parameters of BC Build?
It depends what you mean by low income housing.
Well, what we were looking at targeting was there are lots of not to be gender specific, but individuals that go into the hospital for a while, they come out, they find that their rooms have been rented out or whatever it is. This way they would have a secure place to go in to the hospital, come back out, and their rents would be secured. That type of issue. We very like low income. I'm going to call them desperate people that if they didn't have a place to live, they'd be living in a car or living in a cardboard box.
Well, first of all, your project sounds amazing, and I think it's a really good model. And we are working with some other churches that are looking to build a congregation gathering space that can also be a space for community, and then some form of housing on top. But as I said in my remarks, BC Builds is very targeted towards middle income working people. So that your project might be a good one for the community housing fund. And I would say that, but I don't know enough about it, but what you've described, it doesn't seem, and as we're imagining BC Builds, it doesn't seem like a BC Builds project. We've
hired a consultant that has done this work before, so they'll because this is a new, as I understand now, the city got we have been struggling with it for 2 years, going through the rezoning stage, and then we had to go back because there had to be an OCP amendment and everything else like that. So, but now with what the governments are doing, it seems like as if it's now going to be fast track. So you may not have the same challenges that we did that took 2 years. Hopefully that now it's going to be in a shorter space of time. But I appreciate having this.
Well, thanks for being here. Yeah, I think Lisa identified there are 3 streams of funding, and she was talking about for folks who are already have enough income, but they still can't afford to live somewhere. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, please.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Lisa. Liam Michayluk with More Than a Roof Housing. I'm curious, as a developer and operator of housing, can we combine BC Builds? So if we're going to go for a CHF application and just depending, so we like to do that spectrum of housing where you've got low to moderate income folks and totally support that middle income, that missing middle. So is there a possibility of combining the funding?
Yes. On a large site in particular, ideally, like the cleanest way to do it is in 2 buildings, a CHF building and a BC Builds building on one site. So for larger sites, I think that could work really well. Again, the program doesn't exist yet, but we're trying to imagine into the future so that we can hit the ground running. So yes, some kind of CHF BC Builds combination would be possible. It would be difficult in, say, a 60-unit building to try and cram 2 different funding programs into that space, but on larger sites, I think that could be a real advantage.
So if it was a larger building, could you airspace parcel, or are you really preferring that separate?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, it would depend like the BC Builds part of the project would need to make economic sense unto itself. So the carrying costs and operating costs, say of a 30, say it's a 60-unit building and 30s CHF, 30s BC Build. So I think it could work in one building for sure. But I think the key thing with BC Build's projects is they need to be financially self-sustaining. There's no ongoing operating subsidy, but I think there's lots of room for creativity there for sure.
Okay, cool. And early 2024?
Aiming for that. We have winter 2024, early 2024. Anyway, we're working as hard and fast as we can. We know that people are struggling out there, so it'll come when it comes, but we're all working hard to make it sooner rather than later.
Well, thank you. We're really anticipating this, so we're looking forward to it. Thanks for the work.
Thank you for your work.
Thanks, Leanne. And Leanne will be sharing a little bit later from More Than a Roof's work that they're doing. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for joining us this morning. Yeah, clapping would be a good thing for her.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks again to the church for putting on
You said
this.
something on February 24 is when it'll roll out, I think.
Well, I did not say that, and you said that, and we don't want to launch a program that's not going to work, to be completely honest, and we need to make sure it's going to work, it's going to make sense, and so we need to take the time to get that right. So it'll come when it comes. I know that the minister and premier are very keen to have the program roll out, but they want to make sure it's a good program.
Very good. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. That's okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be careful what you say. We're pleased that she could join us. And Lisa had some other things today. We now want to turn to Tim Kuepfer. Tim is joining us on Zoom as well. Tim's got a funeral that he's officiating in a little while, so we appreciate Tim coming on now. He's being called as a pastor to Chinatown Peace Church in 2017. He's taught theology for a number of years in Zimbabwe. He was a lead pastor at Peace Mennonite Church in Richmond for 12 years, a short stint as the senior pastor at First Baptist in Vancouver. He's got a Master of Divinity and Theology from Regent. And he said besides Jesus and his family and his books, he likes hiking and cycling and ice hockey. And he's married to Sandra and has 3 young adult sons who are also in the throes of figuring out how to do housing well. So his history as well is he helped his dad growing up and concrete construction as well as building housing. So he's done that end as well. So Tim, thanks for joining us and sharing some of your vision for some housing happening in Vancouver. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Henry. Thanks for the invitation. Good morning. I'm grateful to be here on the traditional Musqueam territory in Richmond, as Henry said, a Peace Church in the youth pastor's office, though I'm only attending the funeral of a good friend of Fred Bartel. I'm not officiating. But yeah, here in Vancouver, a question some of us have been asking is, could our Vancouver housing crisis and our challenges around revitalization in our MCBC churches, could they come together in a golden opportunity? So we feel like we need a plan, a way forward. And what I'd like to share with you briefly this morning, I've already shared with Sherbrooke Mennonite Church leadership, and tomorrow we'll be sharing with their whole congregation. So this week, Henry wondered whether maybe I'd share a little of that here, because while I'm going to be sharing it specifically with Sherbrooke, it's not unique or specific to Sherbrooke. It's also here at Peace, we've been talking about something like this, and of course at Chinatown Peace Church, where I'm currently a pastor. So yeah, what does revitalization through life together look like? So we've been asking, I've been in conversation with a number of co-living groups, people who live together in community. One of the groups is, as Henry already mentioned, my own 3 sons live together with a number of other young people, and there are quite a number of houses like that around Vancouver. So a vision here would be of young Mennonites living, working, serving, worshiping together on our church properties. And Sherbrooke Mennonite Church, of course, is where we're starting, or we've been talking with specifically. They have a really nice big parking lot, and so in some ways it's the easiest place to look and to begin with. Thank you. Next slide, please. So what we've been dreaming about, thinking about together is First of all, Sherbrooke Mennonite Church would lease the land under their parking lot and education wing, and then a newly formed society of MCC or MCBC would partner together with Peak Development. It's an organization that I've become good friends with. The developer Jordan Eng, he has worked with a lot of affordable housing projects, and it's in right now constructing a large one in Port Coquitlam. To build rental housing designed for intentional community living. And then young Anabaptist Christians live, work, serve, worship, engage in mission together as a parish on this property. And then hopefully the goal would be for the more traditional, long time Mennonite church there, Sherbrooke Mennonite Church, and the co-living residents who live in these pods within this larger building would seek to grow together to become a more unified, or one unified Mennonite parish there. Thanks. Next slide. So again, a concept here, 4-story building that maximizes shared community space, lots of space for people to meet together, that people share, smaller spaces for individuals. So co-living is where often kitchens and gathering spaces and living rooms and that sort of thing are shared by a group of people who aren't related. Next slide. So we've just looked at we would put the parking lot there for Sherbrooke Mennonite Church would go underground. The education wing, which was built a little later than the church itself, would also be removed and then replaced with shared living space for the church and the residents of this new building. Next slide. And then, so this is just a bit of a concept here. We're again at very early stages, but this shows 4 different pods over 2 floors. Pod for about 20 people. We have a group that lives as a common purse community here in Vancouver that's also looking for new space. And then there's a number of different young adult groups that are living as co-living communities. And then also there's talk about the need for international students to have some form of housing. So sort of like residences on a university, but again in a pod where there's a lot of shared community space. So first, and then of course space, the blue space there would refer to space shared both by the church and by the residents. This is the second floor, again, concept of that. And then on the 3rd and 4th floors would be more traditional apartments where perhaps where it'd be more like co-housing, or where they live together, people share common meals 1, 2, 3 times a week, but have their own kitchens, their own living room spaces, their own bedrooms. So more of the normal apartments we think of. For a building that would house, we think around 75 to 100 people. So just a few of the people I want to that would partner with this. I've been heading up, leading the kind of the vision, trying to bring the different groups together, the people who are living in community, intentional community, Sherbrooke Mennonite Church, the area church, and the developer, and And so there's Jordan Eng, the developer, and the church and the co-living groups. Thanks. So if we were to, what would be the steps to making this happen? Tomorrow, as I said, I'm presenting this to the church and they'll be thinking about it. If they made a decision to go ahead with a feasibility study, then that would take about 3 months. And then following the feasibility study, if it works to build something like this with these co-living pods and other apartments, then if the church would decide to proceed with that, then there'd be stretch of time to figure out how the finances come in place for the development stage, and then about 2 years, we think, for the permits to be in hand. Though, good news, I think that BC Builds has a huge impact on especially the feasibility study, and so we're looking forward to that coming out early in the year as well. And then we would see the possibility of having a building complete by December 2027. We think the feasibility study would cost about $30,000, and that would, that needs to be raised by the church. We would also then need to find a way to loan about $700,000 for the soft costs, for all the architectural drawings, for the permitting, for the rezoning, all of that. And then we think we've looked at a pro forma, and the construction costs would be around $18 million for that building. So, some of the, what would be some of the, especially feasibility risks? Well, neighbors could organize and amount of strong resistance to the project. Sherbrooke Mennonite Church is located right in the center of a residential single homes neighborhood. And so there's questions around that. And also the city of Vancouver may decide this is the wrong place for a 4-story residence. I put this picture down because it's a picture of the original Mennonites in Vancouver, the Machenheims, or the young women's home on, on George Street, I believe, not too far away from Sherbrooke Mennonite Church. The first Mennonites to come to Vancouver were young women who worked in upper class homes and lived together in intentional community. And that's how the church at Peace on 52nd began, the first Mennonite church here in Vancouver. And just one more thing, why now? Well, the churches in Vancouver are, as we've heard, even out in Abbotsford, are struggling. We are aging. We're struggling with our budgets. We wonder about the future, but we do have Mennonite young people who are willing to share life together. We have church-based. We've seen church-based co-living in other places, and has shown proven results in revitalization, where people who live together and worship and serve together, there's growth there. Even if people don't live there for the rest of their lives, and they may move out, they tend to have built strong relationships that grow the church as well. And so we just think innovation is paramount at this time. We need to think about a new way of doing church. And I feel like this may be a golden opportunity for our housing crisis and the needs of our Mennonite churches right now to come together. Thanks, I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, Tim. Appreciate the vision and just imagining what could happen. Any questions or comments around vision? So the next step is that the congregation tomorrow is going to, Sunday, to look at this and make a decision of whether they want to move forward with the feasibility study, spend the money to do that. All right. Any questions for Tim on this vision that he has? It's there for others. All right. Great. Thank you, Tim. Thanks for being with us, for sharing that with us, and we'll think of you tomorrow. There's a question on Zoom. Thank you. Go ahead, please. Yep, go ahead. That's you.
Was it my question?
It's your question. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Joe Klunda. I'm a member of Roman Catholic Church, St. Patrick's in Oak Bay. And I just want to congratulate Tim for the innovative thinking, the whole idea of co-living, co-housing as a way to revitalize your church. I think that's got some legs. And I'm also going to encourage you, Tim. The world is changing. It's 2023, not 1993 anymore. And believe it or not, NIMBYs in 2023 are no longer ruling the day. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of pushback for your 4-story building. In fact, I would be surprised if you didn't get support for your 4-story building. So I mean that to encourage you and to encourage your team. Do not fear the NIMBYs. They no longer have the power they had 30 years ago.
Thank you, sir. Okay, no more fear. Yeah, please.
Just want to, one more encouragement for you, Tim, and for us who are from Abbotsford to think through. I'm Dan Kyte. I'll be presenting later. I'm with GiveWise Foundation. My daughter is 21. She's 4th year at Trinity Western, and she grew up never wanting to go to camp, never wanting to live in the co-living kind of idea, but she has found living on campus at Trinity Western to be a life changer for her. And now even more and kind of intensively, she's at what's called the Laurentian Leadership Center in Ottawa, working, they work at Parliament. There's 21 students, mostly Trinity students, and they live in an old mansion. My wife and I just got to go visit her a few weeks ago. They live in an old mansion there. That was a railway tycoon. It's beautiful. It's 6 blocks from Parliament, but the idea is co-living. They have roommates, they have shared kitchen, and for a girl who needs her private space and all that kind of thing, she has appreciated how it's grown her. And so I think in Abbotsford, for kids who are graduating from high school and don't know where they want to go yet, it's a bit daunting. And what do? They end up living at mom and dad's house, and they don't grow the same way as they grow living with others. And the options here are, go to CBC. What if they don't want to go to CBC? What if they don't want to go to Bible school, but they want to go to a university, a community university where there aren't really dorm options? So there are, I think, all kinds of opportunities for co-living for young people. I know there's like Attengard, community living is one that comes to mind, but there's very few or very little of that happening. And so I think the idea of paying rent for someone who just graduated from high school and is going to college, that's a big daunting thing for both of my kids. My son's 19 and he's living at home, and who knows, knowing some of my friends who have 28-year-olds and 30-year-olds living at home, we don't know how long he's going to be there. So community-based living, Tim, especially in Vancouver, where it's the rents and the density are overwhelming. So good on you. We'll be praying for you tomorrow.
Great, thank you, Dan. Any comments or questions? Anybody else online? All right, thanks. Appreciate it, Tim. Blessings to you. Our third presenter this morning is Rebecca Pousette. She'll also be joining us on Zoom, and if I mangled your name, I'm sorry. She's a director in strategy of operations for Cohere Development Society, a not-for-profit development consultant working specifically with congregations, with churches considering redevelopment of their land to include affordable housing. She's worked with the organization since its inception, wearing a variety of hats. History of Cohere is connected to Grandview Church in Vancouver. And Rebecca, thanks so much for taking some time, and we'll give the platform to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Squamish people this morning. I just also first wanted to say I was so excited to see in the title of the event today that there's just such a desire to create affordable housing, because I think that there's so many opportunities for housing right now, and I think that the church in particular has an opportunity to think about how do we create affordable housing. So thank you for having me here today. Cohere Development Society comes from so we're a full service not-for-profit development consulting group, and our core reason for being is empowering churches. We came out of we originated actually in 2013 from one particular project in East Vancouver. On the left side of the screen here, you'll see Grandview Church. They had this parking lot that was on the right-hand side of the church. And a number of members of the congregation had been, the parking lot was not part of the original idea. Actually, where this kind of stemmed from was members of the church seeing a deep need in the community. The neighborhood was changing. People were really struggling to find housing. They're struggling with housing needs, but then also community needs. And so the church began to say, you know, what is it that we're called to? We're seeing this. What's our call in this? And they actually, the group of people that were leading this, they actually found an apartment building that they were going to purchase to create some housing. But what ended up happening, the deal ended up falling through. They were profoundly disappointed. But it actually created this space to say, what do we have? What do we have? What could we do? And this is when someone at a congregational meeting said, you know, we have this parking lot. What could we do something with our parking lot? It's empty 75% of the time. And that is where kind of the dream for housing on the parking lot started from. So fast forward many years later, this is the Cohere building on the right-hand side of the screen. It opened in 2018. It contains 26 units of mixed income, deeply affordable housing. And it's built and operated for community. So the church, along with their operator, Salisbury Community Society, had this really strong sense of providing community or providing housing that was not just a physical place. It was a place that could be home, a place where someone came home at the end of the day and someone said, "How was your day?" Because that is so important to our to be human, to have someone say at the end of the day, "How was your day?" is profoundly transformative. And so this building opened in 2018, and I wasn't asked to share the whole story today. But if you wanted to look to see the story of the church building this project, there's actually a 12-minute video on our website that you'd be welcome to go look at. And some of the original folks that were involved in visioning are in that video. And you can see the whole story there. But I actually just want to put up the next slide. This did not turn out very well. I don't think I can't see it very well on my screen, but I just wanted to show you who the players were in this project. So Grandview Church held the land. Salisbury Community Society was a very small scale operator that was connected to the church, that had a strong vision for community housing. So Grandview and Salisbury were really ultimately the visionaries of what kind of housing was going to be built. And Cohere, we emerged out of this whole process. Salisbury had vision, Grandview had vision, but they needed someone with development expertise to come and help with the project. And so Cohere was really formed. There were some folks in the congregation who had come with really significant development expertise. They were on that original board, as well as some folks who had strong fundraising connections and abilities, and really understood the deep vision of the project. So Cohere was originally developed just actually for this first project in East Vancouver. What ended up happening is that during this project, we had a number of churches come to us and say, "Hey, we hear you're doing this. Can you help us?" And we said, we just want to get this project built. And then once the building opened in 2018, we ended up touring just a number of faith communities through the project. They were just really inspired and excited and said, "You know, we've been thinking about this. Could you help us?" We said, we're volunteer driven. why do you want us to help you? Like, what is it about us as an entity that could help you? There, there's development consultants out there, there's other developers. So we started asking, why are churches coming to us? And part of it was that we had gone through the messy nature of working with a church, and churches are beautiful. I'm a church attender myself, and I was actually part of Grandview Church in this original project. And it takes to move a congregation forward, takes a certain amount of effort. Churches are not housing developers. Churches are not housing operators. Churches are worshiping communities. And so we really needed this extra help to help us move through this project. And so, yes, as an entity, Cohere started saying, what's going on? What's going on with all these churches? And we were looking at the numbers, and places of worship inhabit over $7 billion of property in Metro Vancouver and Greater Victoria, which is wild. They're, I think, second to municipalities. I believe that they're the second largest owner of land collectively. And they're interested in developing affordable housing. But we also noticed some significant barriers that many churches were sharing with us. And so we started just doing some early stage research to say, what kind of services could we offer to break down those barriers? So some of those barriers that we saw was that churches have a strong social vision. They might have a vision to serve the needy in their community. They might have a vision to serve refugees. They might have a vision to serve single moms, but they don't. Translating that into a coherent, informed housing vision is a whole nother level. And so they really needed help translating the vision that already existed within their community into something that worked for housing. We also found that churches were full of lay people with skills and good intent, but then there was sometimes a lack of development knowledge to navigate the complex process. So I think that this was true, especially even in the Grandview project. We had people with a little bit of housing knowledge, but nobody with the knowledge to kind of help guide us through the whole project. And sometimes someone with a little bit of knowledge is actually a little bit more dangerous because they can steer you in a whole nother direction. And so they were coming to us kind of just for the development knowledge. There's good leadership often, but not always governance, a governance structure capable of making timely decisions. So they just wanted advice in terms of like, how do we structure this so that our congregation has input, so that our housing committee can make these decisions in an informed, timely manner. You need to move this project through quickly, and we need to not go back to the congregation for every single little thing. But yet we do want to have some meaningful input from the congregation. So they were looking for us for advice on that. And then the other challenge that we continually have run into is that churches often have land, but they don't always have the upfront cash to get to the stage where more financial resources are available. So there is, once you have a vision, once you have a business plan, there's quite a significant amount of funding available to help with some pre-development, but getting to that place is often challenging. You often need a couple $100,000 to get there, and most churches don't have that sitting around. Some do, but not everybody. And so we saw that there was a need to offer services either below actual cost or kind of on a loan basis. So some of the outcomes that we were seeing of these barriers, we were seeing churches that were just talking about circling for years in this concept planning stage. And with that, kind of costs go up, morale and vision goes down. And the other thing that we've seen is just churches letting go of any kind of missional or social vision, just saying, this is too hard. Let's just get a for-profit developer to do this for us. In that connection to the church mission kind of just being lost and people being sad about that halfway through the process. And then really for-profit developers are driven primarily by their bottom line, their financial bottom line. And that is that is not necessarily what a church is driven by. And so these projects really felt that their interests were not being met as much at the table, and they didn't have the advocacy to really have their needs or their desires met. And so actually was just touring a bunch of churches last week in Vancouver and heard this in a number of them where churches actually just they didn't have the knowledge and the advocacy ultimately to get the social vision that they wanted out of their projects when they partnered with a for-profit developer. And there is going to be a time and place for that, but we actually just want to provide an alternative to that. We want churches not to feel where that they have to go down that route. So who are we? Can you go to the next slide? Great. So we're basically about 2 years ago, we started business planning to create not-for-profit development consulting services. So we're currently working with 5 churches in very early stages in Metro Vancouver, all the way actually from Victoria, New West, a couple of them right in Vancouver, one in Burnaby. And our way of operating is really to come alongside with partners to empower. We know that churches have tons to offer. There's so much capacity within churches in terms of vision and volunteer capacity. And we basically want to come in with the skills to help empower and find that capacity that's within the church. On the other hand, there's some churches that there is that. On some of the other churches that we're working with, they don't have that capacity at all. And so we're doing a lot more rather than kind of supporting what's there. We are kind of really leading the development consulting. And then I think lastly, just what I just want to say is that we really want to help churches maximize their mission and social good. And so we're going to help you we would help you get creative around, you may feel like to make this project work, actually, we have to sacrifice you are going to probably have to sacrifice on some of your ideals. But we would help you explore all kind of avenues to, whether it's like maintaining affordability, maintaining your worship space. We think that there's room for creativity. There's financial help available that can make affordability. And so we would help you find every way of creating as much social good as possible. And so we're kind of just unapologetic that that's what we do in our services. If a church is looking to kind of just maximize the profit, that's just not in our that's not our primary client, I guess I would say. There's lots of groups out there that are working in that space. So what would we actually do? We've kind of lumped, so the development process kind of has 6 big lumpy stages. Starting kind of with the visioning and concept planning. And I just want to say development is super iterative. So actually the very first step is really ensuring that you have a developable piece of land. We've had some groups come to us and it's on ARL land, and they have such a strong vision and they've done so much work visioning, and we have one meeting with them and we say, unfortunately, like there's probably no chance that in the next 20 years this is going to be housing. Like this is just looking at what's around you. It's farmland. It's there's no precedent for having changes made to this. And so we just really actually advise before you do too much visioning, really ensuring there's actually likelihood of a project. So yeah, visioning and concept planning. What do you want to build and why? I think that this is especially important for groups, for churches that have a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of ideas in them. Getting really, really clear on your non-negotiables. Getting really, really clear on why you're doing this. Is it to fund your new sanctuary? Is it to maximize the use of your parking lot? Is it to create a place housing for the young families in your community. Just really honing in on your primary objectives early on will really affect everything, and getting clear when you have to make decisions down the road that involve trade-offs and involve a little bit of disappointment. You're going to have some hopefully some like visioning documents to go back to and say as a community, you know, this is what we decided. These are our non-negotiables. Okay, this means we might have to go and raise an extra $1 million. We're going to do that. So as a community, getting that vision right at the get-go is going to be really, really important. Feasibility, really asking what's possible on this land. What can you build? What density is the city going to allow? How are we actually going to make this financially possible? So really ensuring that there's a feasible project there right at the get-go, really important. We then go into kind of business planning. So this will be kind of the story of your vision, probably architectural drawings and your budgets kind of all in one document. And once you have a strong business plan, that's when you can start really seriously going to a municipality and saying, hey, we have a project here, and going to funders as well and saying, hey, we have a project here. That'll lead to kind of design and approvals, creating a design, getting approvals to build it, then construction, and finally operations. And sorry, I've just run through that, but I think that I am actually out of time. And we would just, as an entity, we're always happy to meet with an organization in the very, very early stages for an hour initial conversation, just to talk about your project. No cost. We're just there to talk about your project and help you kind of get down the right path. And I'm going to leave it there.
Oh, thanks, Rebecca. That was very, very helpful. Appreciate the energy and the vision that's come out of your congregation and the work you're doing now. Any questions or comments to Rebecca and the work that she's part of with here? Yes, please.
Yeah, Rebecca, thank you for your presentation. I think we've gone through many of the same sorts of processes in the first chapter of the Emmanuel Church's effort to try and deal with affordable housing. The question I had as you were presenting was, you're building an apartment block, and apartment blocks are always known to be a place where community really is the last thing that happens, because people tend to want to house and not relate to neighbors who are just next door. Do you do anything that helps to overcome the question of how you build community within an apartment block? It's an irony that, you know, is confusing, but it happens. It happens all the time.
Great, thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. And actually, that's where our name came from. Is Cohere is short for community here. So the first housing project that we built was actually designed specifically thinking about how do we create this space in a way that facilitates community. And so what that looked like was actually creating significant amounts of common space where other buildings would just kind of maximize units. And then thinking about where those common spaces were, thinking about how people were going to run up into each other in those spaces. So the first building was really, it was an experiment in building to kind of create community. I think that there's some things that have really worked in that building and some things that we would definitely do differently next time. And then I think that the thing that we've learned, we're working with another group right now that's everything they do revolves around creating relational connections and community. And they're saying how they're currently the refugee organization and they want to scale up into an apartment, and they're saying, can we do this? And I think the other thing that we're really realizing is just that actually who your operator is also really critical. So you can build the space, you can build the space to create community, and I think like, so also I just want to say our place was like 4 stories. It wasn't 10 stories, and I think building community in 10 stories is a lot more difficult. I think you could probably think about how to do it in a way where, you know, floors or pods were created, but there is some research out there that's been done by the Hey Neighbor Collective around the size and how do you build for connection and community. And I would encourage you to look at that. And I think, yeah, we're finding that like who operates it and thinking about how do they create culture within the building, within the residents is actually just as essential as the space. But I'd also be happy to point, if you want more resources, I'd be happy to chat with you about that.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, please, Shel.
Thanks, Rebecca. I really appreciate what you're saying here. You know, I've been in local church ministry for 25 years, and one of the things I've noticed with building, whether it's a church building a building or developing community-based housing, is that it can suck the oxygen out of the room for the church's existing mission. And I really, maybe this is a softball question, how would a group like Cohere help a church not forget that its main mission is not even developing housing for community, but actually being a community regardless of whatever facilities are going on? Because churches can really die and derail when they're in the middle of these things of 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 years, forgetting that there's a mission before them, regardless of their building, while they're trying to integrate the building back into it. I don't know if you can speak to that all, but I really like what I'm hearing in terms of seeing so many churches, pastors also losing their jobs or being burned out, or board chairs being burned out after, you know, the marathon of the building sucking too much of the oxygen out of the room. So that's my pastoral executive minister hat concern right there, is don't kill your church in spite of whatever building, good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've named it, and it's a real risk. And so I think even when we look back on the Cohere project, there was so much goodness and so much cost to so many people. And I do think that, I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is add capacity, and so that your church leadership is not kind of completely derailed by a housing project, you know, that you can set up structures that, you know, you have a housing committee that can bear the primary cost of that, and then have, you know, a consultant coming alongside you in that process. I would just strongly encourage bringing other people on board. I think doing it on your own. So Grandview tried to do it on their own at the beginning for a long time, really, really challenging. And you know, how could we actually help you? I think we could help by bringing capacity. And then I think naming it up front, this is a risk, we don't want to do this. I think as, you know, we think through the process with you, we can help you protect that. And I think that, but I do think, you know, naming it as part of actually your values right at the beginning is really important. We don't want a church to become a housing operator. That's not the goal of this church. The church is we want to use our land and steward our land well, but how do we do this? Asking how you set up the structures even of who owns what, who operates what, and that's all going to play into that question.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. Those are helpful questions. Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, please.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much. My name is Amy, and I'm curious, I'm like really excited about hearing about Cohere. I'm definitely gonna get in touch, but I'm also curious if you work with folks that aren't necessarily like, I don't own a church or even connected to a church that owns a bunch of land or has any big dreams like this, as far as I'm aware, but for someone that wants to start like a housing project, are you working with folks that are church adjacent, but not like church owners or like entities rather, but like people who are like, I really want to do this and I have a lot of social connections, but like $5.
we have been our core mandate is really to help faith communities that have land, and so that's been our I'd 100% be open to a conversation to see if there's connections that could be made. And I think as a development consultant, we're really kind of coming in and saying, how can we help you? And so I think, yeah, I just start with the question of, what are you looking to do? What's your vision? I think that a huge part of making housing affordable really is having that land for no cost or free, as kind of Lisa actually articulated earlier. And so part of how we help a lot of the churches that we're working with, they're really actually giving their land for free. And so I mean, the other thing is, though, churches are often looking for operators and other partners. So yeah, I'd love to have a conversation. I think probably you sounds like you're very socially connected, but partnerships would be really helpful for you as you're trying to move your project forward. So yes, I'd be happy for initial conversation.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Amy, for the question. Any other questions or comments? Great, thanks so much, Rebecca. Appreciate you being here with us, and blessings to you.
Thank you.
We're fortunate we've got More Than a Roof here, representatives as well, who've been doing this since the mid-80s. Not sure, well, maybe Leanne will tell us when More Than a Roof started, and somewhere in the 80s, or Lorne. So we're pleased that Leanne is here. She spoke earlier. She's Chief Executive Officer of More Than a Roof. She's been there over 25 years of community and project development experience in the nonprofit sector, extensive experience leading diverse teams and facilitating change, developing and implementing programs, and mediating conflict. Does that come up at all in churches? Anyway, thank you. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this work. So I think you'll be presenting. We also have Lorne up here, who was a founding director and CEO of More Than a Roof for 25 years and has lots of other experience. So thank you for being here. Yeah.
I always think I'm taller than I actually am. And I'm tall enough. I'm tall enough. Thank you. Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge here in Abbotsford that we are on the unceded traditional ancestral territories of the Stalo, Squeeze, Sumas, and Quadra First Nations, and also the Nooksack Indian tribe. More Than a Roof. Says, how's that? Oh, hey, amplification. Yeah, so I have been privileged to be the CEO now of More Than a Roof for about 5 years. And prior to that, I grew up under Lorne's leadership. So I'm really glad that we're here today. He's been my mentor for a long time. And together we've done some really good and important work together. And on the slide that you see, what we really want to do is break cycles. And we want to break cycles of poverty and homelessness. It's really hard. You get onto a hamster wheel often, and the majority of us are a couple of paychecks away often from needing the support and services that we provide as a housing provider. So that's really our mission and purpose, is to break those cycles. And we do that through transformative, affordable housing communities. Lisa was saying, we talk a lot now about the missing middle. And if you can imagine we do a spectrum of housing. So we do deep subsidy, we do rent geared to income, which is 30% of household income. And we also do low end of market. And so what that means is you find out what the market rental is in any given community, and we charge 80 to 90 to 95%, depending on how the numbers pencil out and making sure we can afford to run the building. But if you can imagine right now, that housing income limit is $128,000. So the landscape of affordable housing has changed, and transformation is for all of us. It's for everybody. And so we want to make sure that it's not just about the building, it's what happens in the surrounding community. It's like church. It's not just about what happens here on Sunday morning. It's really about what happens when we go outside the door of the church and we want to minister to our neighbors. We feel that with our housing communities. I started as a tenant. I know what it's like to live under the values and the ethos of a group that really, really cares about me, about my family, and about the transformation that happens for us so that we can thrive and succeed and find stability. Next slide, please. Thanks for being up there with me. Awesome. Thank you. So we do have brand promises and we talk about it. Our brand has grown steadily over the years. It's since 1984. It was a group of Mennonite business folks who said, hey, how can we interrupt what we see as a housing crisis? So they came together, they purchased a piece of land really close to where here is right now in Victoria. So our head office is actually in Vancouver, just off of Commercial Drive. And that's what started. And so we've grown steadily with about a project approximately every couple of years since 1984. We welcomed the first tenants home in 1986. And so we really are about that transformative housing experience. So we want to make sure that it's not, housing is one thing, right? But it's what are we doing to help people combat isolation and find their voice, to find community and to find belonging. And that's what's really important. And Rebecca touched on that. Like, you know, you don't ever want to lose your mission. Our mission is different than your mission, but you don't want to lose that mission. So that piece is really important. We offer more than programs and services. Excuse me. So we used to be MCBC, Social Housing Society. Super long acronym. And there's a whole story there. Lorne can tell you that story if you want to corner him for coffee later. But we became more than a roof, and the name really embodies what it is that we do. It's more than a housing provider. So we really want to do things. We don't like the word programs, but it works. So it's really about those programs and services that bring a degree and a quality of life to people that they experience. Like, you really matter. You're just like me. We're a lot more alike than different. So let's come together to do life. And we put our faith in action. So we are a faith-based Christian housing provider. Whosoever may come and live in our communities. We have everybody and anybody that needs affordable housing, that needs social housing, that needs mental health support, addiction recovery support. You may come and live in our housing, and we will love you. It's a mandate. It's calling. But everybody on our staff team is a Christian. And it's a beautiful setting. It's a beautiful workplace. Next slide, please. So our values and business culture, bringing people home is just about the quality and degree, the degree of quality of life, honoring the dignity and the worth of the entire individual. We're all created in the image of our Lord and Savior, and we live up to that mandate well. Practicing radical generosity and a culture of contribution. It's about giving of our time, of our talents, of our skills, our abilities. It's money if you have it. It's about really taking what God has given you and using it to the betterment of the communities around you and for His glory. We create holistic community. It's really about that whole spectrum of wellness. We want financial wellness, social wellness. We want to see people in community learning how to live in their environments, going from hoarding to not hoarding, and those sorts of things. Putting our faith in action. It's just an integral part of what we do. This is our response to community. And this is how we show up at work. And this is what we want to do with the talents that God has given us. And then excellence with purpose. We are known as a housing operator and a developer and a partner that does business with excellence. And it's a non-negotiable for us, right? God has given us excellent things to put into practice. And so we do that well. Next slide. Thank you. So when we talk about a continuum of housing, we are a rare housing provider in the province that we provide housing for singles, seniors, families, folks with disabilities, and we have a healthcare-based housing arm as well. And we do one of the largest addiction recovery programs in the Vancouver Coastal Health region, and a mental health arm, a very strong, robust mental health arm in North Vancouver. It's permanent and it's affordable. I am a fan of permanent housing. I'm not a fan of transitional. There is a place for it. And I support it. I don't mean I'm not a fan. It's just that that's not what we do. It's not an avenue that we would pursue. We don't do modular housing. There's a vulnerability that happens to people. They feel really good in that first day, in that first week, in that first month. But 6 months in, somebody's talking to you about what's your next, where are you going to go next? And moving's stressful, and not knowing where you're going to go on top of moving, it's a recipe for people to stay in that cycle of poverty and homelessness that we want to move them on from. So an organizational overview, Lorne was challenging me recently actually about what's our portfolio look like? And I always think about our directly owned portfolio, but we are responsible for over $400 million of social purpose real estate across the province. So we have 15 tenant communities, 1,200 plus homes. We've talked about the divisions. We have family, we have singles, we have seniors, and we do healthcare-based housing as well. We have about 232 new units coming on deck in the next 12 to 24 months. I would covet your prayers. We submitted 3 housing proposals yesterday to the Community Housing Fund. Lisa Helps talked about that earlier, and it's about 450 new units in 3 different communities in the province. So your prayers are welcomed, please. I think we're over 2,000 tenants at this point, and I've talked about the different things that we do. So our supportive housing, it's not formal. So we would never apply to the supportive housing funding program, for example. That's typically a 24/7 building. We believe that when you bring a diverse community together, the community starts to support itself. I'm a fan of mixed use. Socioeconomic diversity within a community, I think, is really healthy, because when you go out into a neighborhood, that's what you find. And so I think that when we're building the communities and buildings, that's a really healthy way to do it. So we do social support and inclusion. We address health and wellness. Food security is a big deal. We have an excellent food program. We serve about 1,700 meals a month out of one commercial kitchen downtown. We love to celebrate. We love to have food together. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, somebody's birthday, let's have movie night. It's really about bringing people out, combating that isolation. You can have community spaces. You can think about them. You can build them. It doesn't mean they will come. It's really about engaging and asking your tenants. Like, we don't come in and go, hey, guess what we're going to do for you? We go in and say, what would you like your community to look like? When I go to work, I'm a guest in the home of my tenants, right? And something that's really important from an operator standpoint is a lot of people, especially those of vulnerable populations, have had authority misappropriated over the course of their lives in a lot of different ways. So having a humble posture and helping them to appreciate and understand. And again, I've been a tenant. I understand how vulnerable you are when you hand over your income information and your bank statements and all of the things that you need to do. Your sense of dignity can get chipped away. So how we do that is super important. Next slide. Thank you. So this is just an overview of the housing across the province. So 1986 Vancouver Commercial Drive. That's our head office. It's a really fun place to go to work. It feels like home. And all the way now to 2024 in Vancouver, we've been awarded a new property. I'm not allowed to tell you where it is or what it is, because politics are at play often in the work that we do. But all that to say, it's a privilege, and we're so excited. And the grand opening and the grand announcement will come really soon. So we're really looking forward to that. 2025. Lisa talked today about innovation in the built form, and it's really important. So we are involved in a project called Vienna House. It's just outside of Trout Lake in Vancouver. It's an international project in partnership with the city of Vienna, Austria. Vienna is building Vancouver House, and we are building Vienna House. We are further along than Vienna. They're running into some more challenges. But that's the picture of the building that you're looking at right now. And it is prefab. So it is going to be built offsite, the majority of the project, and brought back onto the site. And that's actually really helpful too. And depending on the site, I mean, this site is beautiful. You're not restricted by where are we going to put the crane? But there are sites that, and sometimes there are smaller churches and smaller congregations where that might be an issue. So getting innovative around the built form, finding ways to build that is less expensive, mass timbers becoming a thing. So this is a 6-story building with 1 7-story rise on one side of it. And so for our purposes moving forward, we do want to scale. We are excited. We do have capacity, 37 years in, a large housing portfolio, depth of knowledge across. We have many, many people in our organization at 10 years plus, 20 years plus, 30 years plus. That includes our board. Our senior director of real estate development says hello and could not be here. He's working on a building project, but he was formerly our board chair. He was formerly my boss. And so we stay because we love our work. We stay because that it is a mission and there is a purpose behind the things that we're doing. And so we're good at what we do. And I'm okay to say that because we've worked hard to get that reputation. We say it with humility, but we say it knowing that we need groups, we need folks to stand up and go, we're good at this and we can do it. We want to partner with organizations, and our foundation is one way we're going to do that. I'm going to invite Lorne to come up and talk to you about our foundation. He was our ED for a long time, and now he's the ED of the foundation. And so he's going to close out the presentation, and then I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, thank you for the invitation to come and just say a few words, and I will just focus on the work of the foundation. The inside joke is that this is an 18-year-old startup. The idea for the foundation came along about 20 years ago, and as everything takes a bit of time, it was 18 years ago that we actually formed the foundation, and it was just to provide all of those things that weren't paid for in a government budget line. So we were addressing poverty, we were addressing health, we were addressing networks of support, we were addressing hope in the human spirit. A lot of people came and from hopeless situations and multiple life traumas, and something on the inside had shut down. So one of the things that we found to be at the core of what we do is just to come alongside and restore that sense of hope in people's spirit. And then we added a fifth value as along the way, and it was conflict resolution. People came from such conflicted situations, they just didn't know how to deal. So our tenant, our conflict resolution page in our tenant handbook is basically Matthew 18 in layman's terms, and so it's a chance to walk through the gospel with people in conflict resolution. So you'll see an infographic up there. What the foundation is doing is our big hairy goal is to raise $10 million over the next 3 to 5 years. We're 20% there, and we want to have an endowment fund that's in perpetuity, funding health, hope, and opportunity in people's lives. And we will also do homes. We seem to have that part of things nailed down. We can do the homes, we can get 4 walls and a roof, but the rest of it usually isn't covered in our project proposal submittals. And so the print is very, very small, but we do a lot of initiatives in the areas of health and health initiatives. We do provide a lot of education for both our tenants and our staff. We are always sending somebody off to school for something or running in-house workshops. And for the tenants, it involves bursaries and scholarships and opportunities for financial literacy is a big one. And what are the bursaries? Internships and yeah, so a lot going on with that. At present, we're all funding it to the tune of about 70,000-80,000 in actual, and then a lot of in-kind contributions. The hope portion of this is where we can bring our faith to the table, and that's with clergy, with counseling, with coaching, with kids services and kids programs, summer camps, and what am I missing? Partnering with churches, yes, and we do quite a bit of that, where churches will come in and do work with us on a lot of things. Yeah, so churches have really adopted our projects in Prince George. In Prince George, the Westwood Church has adopted our project up the hill. In Little Mountain, I think it's Christ City Church has come alongside, and downtown it's St. Peter's Fireside that has come along our downtown projects. And so we have a lot of local interaction with the local church faith communities. And so, yes, that's about it. You know, when I come and do these presentations through the years, you know, our website will get a little more traffic, and sometimes people will click on the donate now button and send us for $500 or $200 or whatever. But and that's great. If you really want to make, if there are people in the community that have deep pockets and really want to make a big impact, I would really pitch our endowment fund, and we can really make a difference in people's lives in a big way that way. So yes, we're actively seeking partners. We have done a lot of partnership work through our 40-year existence, and we're always seeking more. And so we do treat our major investors, which is government and the health authorities, as major investors. We treat them as partners and with a great deal of care and respect, and honoring their goals in investing in us. And we also want to do that with community investors. So thanks for your time this morning, and available for questions.
Thanks, Lorne. And it's good to know we've got over 40 years of Mennonites being involved in this work. So we're not new at this work. We're just trying to figure out how to do it continue to do it in a good way. Are there any questions or comments for Lorne?
Thanks, Lorne, and my name is Laura Lone. The question I have is, in your partnerships with churches, if the church owns the land, are you okay with that? And More Than a Roof becomes the developer and the programmer?
Great question. And yes, I think that we need to steward our assets well. I always encourage the churches, steward your asset well. I'll go over here. So, yes, so it wouldn't be an issue for the church to retain ownership of the land. Land is never free. Like, we talk about the land being free, it's not. Like, the cost of development is just so high. And I agree with what Rebecca said, like, you have to be really careful. We know of a church situation that the for-profit developer came along, and that's not always a bad thing. They do have money. They do have the ability and the capacity to build well. You just need to make sure that structure, the legal structure, the financial structure, is also in favor of the church. But it costs money to reimagine your worship space and to create a community hub and a place that's used 7 days a week and not just 1 day a week. So it just, have the right lawyers in place, have the right business structure in place. It is still a business transaction, and it needs to be treated as such. So there's a big process that way, but I'm a fan of the churches absolutely hanging on to their assets and being able to imagine how that gives stability and sustainability for the church. Yes.
Anyone online? Let's see if there's anyone in there. No. Thank you. Thank you for that. The good words and the depth of knowledge and history and good work that's happening. All right, if there's no more questions right now, well, they're here, as well as some other folks are going to be presenting. So let's take a 10-minute coffee break, and then we will come back at whatever time is 10 minutes from now. What time is it now? Oh, who knows what time it is? 10 to 11. So coming back at 11. Thank you. All right, in just a moment, just waiting for Phil, who's going to share a bit of information for us. So welcome back, you folks online. Hope you had a good little break, and we did. Hey, Brother Phil, it's all yours.
Just a couple of sort of housekeeping items for you. Can you hear me, or is that okay? First of all, I wanted you to just to note that it is a really complex operation to pull off with people here in person and online. And so I would like to, I thought it's gone extremely seamlessly so far, and that is all due to Emmanuel Dengesi, our council chair. If you can see Emmanuel and Naomi, yeah, and Kevin. Yeah, there we go. So you know, it's not an easy thing to seamlessly merge those, and I think they've done a fabulous job so far. So thank you, Emmanuel and the team there, right? The other thing is we are going to be working hopefully soon in getting a splash page up on MCBC's site with some information. All those who have presented today, I'm giving you due warning now that we do want to post your email on the website if people want to get a hold of you. So if you don't, let me know and we won't do that, but we'll make sure that gets up there. And if you want us to get a hold of your email or phone number for future use, on the bottom of the invite here is a link to my website, not my website, my email address. Please send me an email, and we'd be glad to hold those together, and if you know, sending out any future information that comes. But it seems like people are connecting and making some really good connections here, and that's what this is all about. So thank you.
All right, very good. We're recording, are we, Emmanuel? Excellent. Okay, so thank you. And then we'll organize it so we can post some stuff on a web page on the MCBC website. We'll work on that with people who know how to do those things. We'll work on that. We'll just instruct them. It'd be really nice if they did. This second part of our time together, we're going to do a couple of things around Emmanuel Mennonite Church. And the church here has been on a journey for a number of years. I think trying to figure out how to use this property and new resources to generate affordable housing. And Peter Andres is going to share a bit of that journey with us. He's been working on that for a while. He's done a number of things with Communitas and training and accreditation. And he's also still jet lagged from some trip he took to Germany. So we're good he's still standing. He may have to sit down for a bit. So thank you, Peter, and we'll look forward to the story from Emmanuel.
So the year is actually 2 BC, in the year of our Lord. BC? Anyone? Before COVID. When Emmanuel Church had a visit from the Executive Finance Committee. Now, finance committees, the Finance Committee reviews year-to-date statements and budgets and balance sheets and these sorts of things. And I can only assume that the Finance Committee must have, Mike, by the way, will correct me on my attempt to be a history wannabe. But I can only assume that there must have been big tongues of fire that visited the Executive Finance Committee to suddenly say, what can we do? And somebody will have said, let's build an apartment block. Because it was shortly after that we began to entertain a vision for Emmanuel Mennonite Church that carried us through for I think probably a good year, during which we spent probably for 8 of us, I think it was about 20 hours of online virtual time with Van City to fine tune our vision and our goals, and to think deeply about what it is we wanted to do, followed by all sorts of activities that included a feasibility study, architectural drawings that were intended to try and take to the city. The OCP, by the way, those were words that were difficult words for us because it meant that this particular property was not in consideration. Yes, what is an OCP? It is the official city plan, which designates certain parts of the city to be previously, or rather rezoned without having particular public hearings. And the inner part of Abbotsford was rezoned for high density living, and Emmanuel Mennonite Church was not part of that inner circle. So high density residential options was not an option for Emmanuel Mennonite Church at that time. We got so far as to invite some partners, Propeller Advisors and City Squared, I think, was the one group that talked about the numbers, and More Than a Roof was involved, at least in conversations, and all of that came to naught when the numbers were presented to us. Once again, it was the numbers that influenced whether or not we were going to proceed, and the numbers, the math just didn't add up. We couldn't make it work, and our high ideals for the project, that is to have all of the building to be available for below market potential residents. The ideal was simply not met. It wasn't even met. It wasn't even close to being met with the numbers that we were looking at, and with regret, we had to come back to the congregation, which, by the way, had given us significant support for the project. There was enthusiasm for that. We had to come back to the congregation to say no can do. And so the in-community committee, which was duly constituted and approved by the Emmanuel Mennonite Church board, council, the in-community committee, in effect, went to sleep. COVID happens, and we awaken again to a situation post-COVID that was not better, but worse. It was worse in terms of financing because of interest rates. It was worse in terms of the cost of rental accommodations for people who were living in the city. It was whatever the need was before COVID, the needs after COVID. That would be AC, by the way. The years after COVID were even more dire than they were before. The reawakening of the in-community committee happened, interestingly enough, with an announcement from the Premier of British Columbia that called on certain cities to pay more attention to available housing product. Without having to say too much, Abbotsford was one of those cities. it opened up the possibility of a meeting with the senior manager for the city of Abbotsford, Henry and Phil and myself representing MCBC's affordable housing group, met with Mark Neal and his associates at Abbotsford City Hall to ask some questions. And the questions basically were, did you hear the Premier's message? And the answer was, we did. Are you responding to it? And the answer was, yes, we are. Are you interested in talking with housing projects outside of the OCP that were high residential? Yes, we are, was the response. Would you be potentially interested in talking with Emmanuel Mennonite Church about its property? Mr. Neal looked at the property on his whatever it is you call this screen. He just calls it up. Oh yes, you're at so and so address, blah blah blah. And there's our property sitting right there, and he's looking at it and he's saying, "It looks very good. It looks like it has possibilities." And so we left that meeting with optimism, and the in-community committee became once again woke up, and here we are today to discuss further about the kinds of things that we could be interested in being involved with. The church in conversation between, the church in conversation has indicated some willingness to engage with in-community committee to rethink and re-engage with the possibility of using this property for development, for residential option, and maybe with conditions or maybe with some imagination, but that's why we're here. And so we're not newbies to the process. We know what the challenges look like. At least we know what some of the challenges look like. But we are always interested in hearing the words, say, from people like Tim Kuepfer in Vancouver about what he's doing and how that might be something we might entertain, but we are once again interested in thinking about how we can re-engage our community here to develop something that looks like addressing a need for housing possibilities in Abbotsford. I think we still have this hope that we can meet the need of people who are below market housing. I think that remains a high ideal for the church. We're more, let's just say we're more open to the possibility of doing something of a mix, something that talks about having people who are able to pay something to have their own rental accommodation, but we still have and harbor this hope that maybe the church can minister to people who are below market, who can't afford market-based housing, and would like to do something that is of a mission for people who are who have that need. I think that's all I want to say. Questions?
Well, thanks, Peter. I think what we'll do is that's part one, and part two, we're going to ask Michael Redekop to come up. Peter's given us the history of where things are being, and Michael is a longtime member, come on, a longtime member of Emmanuel Mennonite Church, as chartered professional accountant since '97 and currently a part owner in Quadra Homes. And he's going to share a bit about what it might look like if you wanted to develop something on this property as a high level approach to things. So thank you. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to clarify two things from what Peter said. When he was talking about the numbers didn't work, that was on the site on Peardenville Road where we were imagining selling this church property because the city didn't want to let us build here, and then buying the I forget the name of the old church that was on Peardenville. Clearbrook, yes, and rebuilding our church there with housing on top of us, and that was the scenario where the numbers simply didn't work. And I'd also like to clarify that yes, there are tongues of fire frequently happening at the finance committee meetings, so you weren't wrong about that. So Phil asked me, how does a developer look at things? Because I have because part of my job is in development, and so I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a developer's take on what might potentially happen here at Emmanuel. This is not something that has gone through the in-committee or anything at church or has really been looked at by anybody. I did this on, you talk about developers doing it on a napkin. I do use spreadsheets and stuff like that. But this is basically a napkin exercise. It's a suggestion of what might happen. It's not a proposal, or there's a lot of assumptions that I just sort of made, and I'll describe those assumptions and how things can vary from those assumptions. So a developer will ask 4 questions or go through 4 things when they're looking at a piece of property. Number 1 is, what can I build? Number 2 is, how much does it cost? Number 3 is, how can I cover that cost with financing, loans, and how much equity do I need? And finally, what is the return on investment or profit, or what is the outcome? So Emmanuel, if you can go back to the map of the church, the first slide. This answers the question of, what can I build? And so this is probably the same thing that Mark Neal from the city of Abbotsford pulled up. It's called Web Map System, which is aerial shots, and you can do all sorts of tools. So I'm far from an architect, and I really am accounting by background. And so, artistic and drawing stuff is not my strength, but I did chart out some blue, the shaded blue area there in terms of, well, this could potentially fit. I'm not sure of setbacks from the road or how far it has to be from the existing building, but I just drew some lines to see what an apartment footprint might look like. That what you see there gives us about 20,000 square feet of space, and it still leaves a substantial amount of above ground space for parking for the church and so on. So we got 20,000 square feet of space. Let's go to the second slide. Well, those numbers are maybe a little hard to see, but I'll highlight some of them as I go. How do they look up there? That's not too bad. So if that's the footprint of our underground, that might provide 57, just a really rough guess, number of parking spots. It's potentially, you could extend the underground beyond that to create more, or else you do a double underground if you want more parking spots. Let's say the building footprint is 16,000 square feet. You pull it off the road a little bit and, give yourself a little more space in certain spots. And I suggested a 4-story there. I think that was kind of the concept we saw earlier with Sherbrooke. So 16,000 square feet times 4 is 64,000 square feet. And if you take out the hallways, amenity rooms and common areas, that gives you like a little more than 50,000 square feet of living space, and giving us about 80 units if you have an average size of 640. The second section there entitled unit mix. That's kind of the jigsaw puzzle of, well, how do you get to 50,000 square feet? And so here's a sample of unit sizes from studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom over various sizes. And, you know, you can mix and match. As an architect, will do a much better job than I did, but that's just an example of how you come up with a building mix for 80 units in those 50,000 square feet. So the last one is, what does it cost? And so then you go back to not the livable square feet, but what we call buildable. So that's the part that does include hallways and common areas and whatnot. So we use 64,000 square feet. I've been seeing 340 per square foot lately for this type of thing. This would assume a double underground if we wanted to create more than 1 parking spot per unit. You know, so that's a discussion about parking. How much do you want to provide? And you can save some money on this number if you're able to do a single underground. The land at 1/2 acre, whether it's contributed by the church or purchased or whatever, you still kind of build that into your cost model because it's still a real value. So I picked a number that's maybe market for this type of land, coming in close to 5 million. We have soft costs of 2 million and a bit. That's paying for the architect and for the insurance and the property tax and a whole list of other little things. If a church or an organization is able to get a low interest loan, like we've been hearing about from the government, like Lisa Helps was talking about that with BC Builds. So then your interest cost is 1 million. And so far, the city has not told us that they're actually going to give us any breaks on DCCs or permits or city fees. Maybe that's coming, but at this point, unless you know differently, Peter, I haven't heard of the city going that far to encourage us. But so the cost comes to almost 32 million or almost 400,000 per unit. So that's what we're talking about, to put that type of structure onto our church building. So let's go to the last slide, and here is where the numbers get real, and there's some difficulties there for sure. The top box is, okay, you start with full market rent. What is this building? Forget about, you know, subsidizing or programs, or just what's it worth at 100% market, if that's what you choose to do. The market rents I use for the suite mix are estimates, not a lot of research. These numbers might be a little bit on the older side. It might be higher right now, but I picked some numbers that had been used recently on a study for Abbotsford. And so we've got a building, let's say, that comes up with 1.6 million of gross total revenue, kind of the brown box there. And then if we move down, use that as our base. So you'll see the first line, I've got three columns there, one at full market, one at a 10% discount, and one at a 20% discount. So for each of these, there's a little allowance for vacancy. Even if your building is full, people leave, and then it takes a month to fill the suite because you've got to fix it up and someone else wants to move in, you know, on the first of the following month. So there's always a little bit of lost revenue, even in this tight rental market. Operating costs, I used 30%. Some operators can do it for less, some might do it for more. It really depends on what you're doing and kind of the situation around the building, like the property tax costs of the city you're in, and all sorts of factors. So I had to pick a number, so I picked 30%, which is 500,000. And speaking of what does a church want to get out of the land. We had loose discussions in our church about renting the land to the apartment building. And so 100,000 per year, that would be probably a great scenario for the church. As we heard, our church is diminishing. This building itself is getting older and needs money. And so a scenario where the church could get, 100,000 a year out of leasing that land to an apartment building would be ideal. The church may say, well, our ministry is this building and we're not going to charge anything, or it could go to let's try and get 100,000 a year or 50,000 a year to help out our church. So those are obviously decisions that have to be made by a church, but I put it in there just so that we could see that, there is a cost to the land. So the green line is how much net return you would get, excuse me, after the expenses. So it's $1 million if you're market, and it goes down accordingly if you're 10% or 20% below. So this money has to be used for servicing debt. And typically the yellow box is how much you have to spend on debt servicing. So it's usually between 80 and 85% is what a bank or a lender will look for. And then the orange bar is kind of what's left over for the investor or the owner. These next few lines is where the numbers get difficult, because it used to be that if you contributed the land, that would almost be enough to build a project. You wouldn't need a whole lot of extra money, but those days are gone because building costs are so high that it's just not realistic to think that you can just, here's the land, that's all we have to do on the financial side. There needs to be more equity. So the pink bar is how much borrowing can we get? Remember, our cost is almost 32 million. And so what kind of loan could you get? There's not going to be any lender, whether it's a bank or a government loan or a private lender, that is going to give you a loan for more than what you can service. So, you have to have enough revenue to service whatever the loan is, no matter who's giving it to you. So the pink bar creates a scenario where it's 3% interest, a 50-year amortization. And those are about as generous terms as you can get. If you're just a private builder and you're not doing any subsidy and you don't have a government program, you're probably paying like 6% interest, and you'll have a shorter amortization. But because this is for charitable purposes, there are loans out there that you may be able to get this. So even under the market scenario, we get a loan for 22 million. It costs us 32 million to build. We are still looking for, this is the blue bar, we're still looking for 9 million in the case of equity under a market. And then it goes to 13 if you subsidize by 10%, or 16 if you subsidize by 20%. So the church is contributing the land in exchange for the rent. So that creates part of the equity. So the brown bar is really how much cash through investors or a grant or some form of private loan in addition to the main loan. So we're talking about, we got to find 5 million just to do full market before we can do something that subsidizes people. And then it jumps to 8 million or 11 million if you want to bring in a building that provides subsidies. And final question is, well, what's the profit? What's the return? So if we find an investor or to put in that 4 million or 8 million or 11.8 million, then how much are we returning every year? So if we go to the orange bar back up there, that's what's being returned to the investor every year. So it's like a 28-year payback or a 58-year payback, and the rate of return is starts at 3.5% and goes down from there. So it's not it's not an attractive investment. It's not like we can just go to a developer and say, hey, give us your equity and we'll give you 3%. Like you can get a GIC for 5%. And so there has to be like a social return. I think Dan is going to talk about that in his next segment, because I've heard him talking about that. And but at the end of the day, you know, it's if you go back to the old Tom Cruise movie, Jerry Maguire, it says, show me the money. We still need someone to show us the money to get these projects off the ground. And that's really one of the main things I want you to take out of this, is that we're full of good intentions. We're full of people that want to help, but Peter said himself, the thing that killed our initial attempt was the numbers, and the numbers are still what's going to make or break a decision. So I think that was all I was going to say. I'll leave it to Dan to solve this problem. Like, maybe that's why he's going last. But if there are any questions, I'll take them before.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful to have just here's what it might look like. Questions or comments? Yeah, please, Laura.
Thanks, Mike. The one question I have is, I'm assuming that your structure or what you built did not include common space. And so when I think of more than just a roof, the whole area for community building, and whether that would be dependent on, let's say, using the church facilities or whatever.
Yeah, when I discounted the building area to livable area by 20%, and that just covers, you know, hallways and common areas, and maybe the city always makes you do like one amenity room. So there's probably one amenity room in there, but you have to assume that, you know, the church building here is the amenity space of that building if you want to do programs.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Anyone online? Yeah, please, in the back.
So I know it had been mentioned about the idea of cars needing to maybe not have so much parking space and stuff around, and to encourage more walking and things. I know that's part of the city plan, is to make the city more walkable. And this does tend to be a bit of a food desert out here for people who are walking. Would adding a small commercial space on the bottom floor benefit the numbers, or is that even a possibility?
Basically, the answer is it kind of comes out the same whether you build a commercial or a residential. In my experience with building 4 or 6-story condos, if we can get away with not doing commercial, we're happier, because it's more complicated and you don't really get any additional return out of it. So the answer is it's kind of a wash. Like if that is something you want and you have a tenant and it's going to add to your programs, then it's fine to do that. It's not going to take away from the numbers, but it won't enhance them. And as far as parking goes, that's a very good point. You can go thin on parking. The city will probably let you, but because we are on a bus route, but the buses don't work that great in Abbotsford. It's not like you can get anywhere you want to go. So parking is still a factor for out here for sure. So you know, you have to build in enough spaces. It depends if you want, you know, if you want middle class, kind of like the types of people that Lisa Helps was talking about, if they're nurses or firefighters, they'll probably have 2 cars. And so, you know, you have to take that into account. If you're going into, you know, a lower income bracket, then it's easier, because a lot of people in the lower income bracket may only have 1 car, or they might not have any. So it sort of depends with what your target is.
So if you just had 1 floor of parking, yours was 2 floors of parking, 2 underground. Right?
Yeah, on the costing model I did 2 levels of underground. On where I sketched it out in the beginning, 1 level only gives you 58 stalls for 80 units, so that's pretty thin.
Peter. Is somebody online?
Only to say that the city, in terms of approval for a project here on this property, the city saw that the property was on a bus route was a positive thing. So whether or not we can actually get there from here or get here from there is rightly a concern that Mike has mentioned, but it was from a city point of view seen as a positive thing from the point of view of approval.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, we'll go over here and then to Amy.
Just a quick question, Mike, since you're here. Would going to 5 or 6 levels significantly change the numbers, or does the cost pretty much cancel out the profit factor in going bigger?
I think you can enhance the profitability or return on investment by going 5 or 6, but it still means more money because you're building more, and the cost to build a 6-story is more costly than a 4-story per square foot because it's heavier and you need to put more infrastructure into the building and more infrastructure into your parquet so that it's structurally sound. So yes, it does make more sense to add more density on the bottom line, but it takes more to get that started too.
I just have a question about maybe not an asset based or like housing as an asset model, but maybe a housing cooperative. Like, have you done work developing and costing out if the church or churches were to try and do like a community housing cooperative where the rents are kind of, or the tenants are more renting to own and it's not necessarily acting the same within the regular market of the city? Because cooperative housing tends to be around like 80% of the regular market costs. But I'm just curious if there's like a completely different business model for that maybe you've had experience in as a developer.
As a developer, no, but when I started working for KPMG as a young accountant about 30 years ago, I was auditing these housing co-ops. This was like in the 90s, and these buildings, these co-ops were, I don't know how long ago those programs started, maybe the 70s. I don't even recall, but early 80s. Yeah, okay. So, but those were government programs, like they don't particularly make sense without, that government support. So just to kind of do that co-op model without the government subsidies doesn't make any more sense than what I was just showing here. Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks very much, Mike. Really appreciate the numbers, and Peter as well. So we're pleased. We got Dan Kyte here. Come on up, Dan. Dan grew up in Abbotsford and still calls Abbotsford his home. They've run a successful single-family building business for 18 years. In the last 5 years, they've been, he and his wife have co-founded GiveWise Foundation. So I'll let you explain what GiveWise is, and that's going to be bringing the money in to make everything happen. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me to this. I thought I was getting an invite to attend, and then I got roped in, which is great. I just want to thank Emmanuel Mennonite Church for hosting this and bringing people together for ideas. First thought, number one, right off the top, before I get to GiveWise, GiveWise is a charitable giving facilitator. not a fundraising entity. Okay, so I'm not here with, sorry, I would love to. I'm not here with any checks or we provide ideas, and so I'll get to that a little later. But I have to thank the Mennonite community at large for two major things in my life. One is at the ripe young age of 12, I moved into Abbotsford and started attending MEI, grade 8. It was 8 to 12 then. And having not come from a church background at all, or a faith background at all, I found faith 2 months into my grade 8 year at MEI and developed some lifelong friendships that last to this day with people like Ratzliffs and Friesens and Peters and one particularly special friendship. My wife, I have to thank the Mennonite community for my wife, who I met at MEI, and she was a Redekop and not related to Mike. And I started at MEI and I knew nobody, and everyone else was related to each other. And I couldn't figure that all out. That was a whole culture shock thing for me. But no, I love it. I'm thankful for MEI to this day. I graduated with VJ Emmanuel, who's head of schools there. And but anyway, to move on. At age 12, when I moved to Abbotsford, Funk's supermarket still existed. It wasn't Lord Co. Most of South Fraser Way was gravel pits. And the strip malls along there were gravel pits. Abbotsford has changed drastically since 1985. And but I call it home. I love Abbotsford. And so in this last few years, having transitioned from being in single family home building to, it's a God story, but I didn't want a new job, and God said, you guys are going to do this, and it's what has developed into GiveWise. But it's taken my wife Tammy and I on a journey about generational thinking, legacy. We are so thankful for mentors in our lives, people who are 10 and 20 years older than us, have gone through the parenting cycles and the business cycles and the life cycles ahead of us. And so we have started thinking the last couple of years, what kind of Abbotsford are we leaving for the future generations? So I mentioned earlier, my kids are 21 and 19 now. But also we've had people working with us and for us for many years, people who get up and work hard every day, and they are finding a hard time making ends meet if they don't have support from older generations. If there aren't some sort of early inheritances involved, good luck. Like, you're not buying any sort of real estate. You're not, you're not thinking about investments, or you're just thinking about making your next rent payment. And I will say, out of blessings from God that I don't deserve, I haven't had to worry about that. It's been a lot of years of successful opportunities taken. Yes, there's hard work. We had to still do the work, but God just kept opening doors. And my children's future and my grandchildren's future is taken care of. My wife comes from a very wealthy family. And so we started thinking, how can we be creative and collaborative with the network we have built, doing business in Abbotsford, business owners, land developers, very successful, very wealthy, although Mennonites aren't allowed to say they're wealthy. I married into the mafia, so I can make some jokes. I've been in Mennonite Church since I was 12. But how can we be creative? And so that's our personal, so there's the GiveWise part of it, but we started asking this and we gathered our network together. And so can we go to the next slide? We gathered together some people from our network and we started to say, okay, folks, even though we're not allowed to admit we're wealthy, what does ROI really mean? Is it always just a percentage in dollars? Or can we rethink ROI? Without guilt for the success that we have attained, how can we be ready for what I think the church has, through all good intention, focused on Africa and Southeast Asia and all these other places in the world. And our community has entered this place of hurting. It was slowly, and now it's more rapidly increasing. And so what if social ROI and the health of our community entered our everyday analysis in terms of owning a business, being successful in our practice? You know, we all know professionals, their lives, the lawyers and the accountants and the people besides business owners, but there are people who have created a certain amount of wealth and they're taken care of now without guilt, but rather with that idea of there are people out there who haven't had opportunities like everyone else does. And maybe you're sitting here today and maybe you have seen, maybe you're on a fixed income, maybe you've seen your income dwindle. And so, you know, there's got to be answers, and we can't just look to the government. We don't want to just, rather than sit there and, oh, the government does this, the government does that, they don't do this, they don't do that. What can we do? And so next slide, please. What we did was we gathered some network together. We said some points we can all rally behind. Our ancestors provided foundational examples of biblical principles of being honest and generous, hard work, wisdom, and Abbotsford has provided amazing opportunities to build families and businesses. And it's a great place. So what we did was we said, okay, there's some points we can all kind of rally behind. Next slide, please. Then we pointed out that housing costs have increased 2,500%, 25 times since since the 70s, early 70s, as opposed to a 4 times increase in income. So that's a over 6 times factor in terms of housing costs versus income. I don't think that's a shock to anyone here, but it's good to see the numbers put right in front of you sometimes. Next slide. So what can we do? That was the answer, or not the answer, sorry. That was the question we wanted to start to answer. And I feel like I said to Phil when I met with Phil and Mike, I said, if we feel like we're at step 0.3 of a 1,000-step journey, but we just have open hearts and open minds. And so as Abbotsford residents, can we create below market housing for the young families, single parents, immigrants, those recovered from addiction, low income individuals, fixed income seniors? So those are we can't be the answer for all with one single group, but how about let's start building a network and bring in organizations like More Than a Roof who have experience in providing help with this. Next slide, please. So yeah, we've got options, and then there's there's a lot of Mennonite business people that as soon as we mention government funding, they do the see no evil, hear no evil thing. And there's been reasons. I mean, there's some PTSD that has resulted. But we started looking at it going, you know what, there's all kinds of models. There's models in Scandinavia. There's models, there's private investment and donation, hybrid models that maybe we could look at. Do we form a society? And then, what we've learned is we don't want to form a society for the society to manage a building. We want to form a society maybe and have an organization with expertise like More Than a Roof to come in and manage a building. We're asking the question about rent to own, co-op housing. So we're open to ideas, and we've got a group of people who sometimes the church looks at them like walking pocketbooks, and actually their ideas, like people who have been successful in business their ideas are worth more than their money. And they've been asked too often by the church just to write a check. The church in its spiritual wisdom has decided this, and we think that you should write a check for this. And so rather than that, let's engage levels of all economic, socioeconomic station, and let's gather ideas. We believe that, so their response, this is a group of about, 12 different families represented, ranged from mildly interested to enthusiastic. There was lively discussion, but it was very broad-based, and it was recognized there needs to be narrowing down to a starter project. Come back, they asked Tammy and I to come back with 3 models, ideas modeled out to them, and they agreed that partnering with the church would be a great place to start. So with 0 promises, I was just really excited to hear that Emmanuel Church has gone through the journey that you've gone through talking with Mike and Phil. So now on to GiveWise. GiveWise is a foundation. It's a registered Canadian charity. And what GiveWise is it's an online charitable giving platform for people of any means. It's free to use. Basically, it's a bit of a Robin Hood mentality. We have advanced solutions for high net worth donors that pay for us to have a platform. It's givewise.ca that centralizes people's giving all into one spot. You basically think of it like a charitable bank account. So this is what got Tammy and I excited 5 years ago, and what God asked us to walk away from our successful building practice to enter the not-for-profit world, because it pays way better. So anyway, we do serve donors of every economic station, and the idea is Stats Canada shows that while donations continue to increase dollar-wise, it's fewer and fewer donors. It's becoming a concentrated bunch that's expected to donate. But generosity is still happening amongst young people. It's just that they're used to, I don't have my phone on me, but they're used to doing everything on this little tiny computer. And they're used to, like, my kids have never written a check. I don't think they ever will write a check. I haven't written a check in a few years. So the idea is donating was still happening, but it was happening through GoFundMe and unregulated. There's scams, all of that. So we offer a regulated, a very highly regulated platform that people can be confident to use. The spin-offs of this, because we were just trying to help digitize giving, the spin-offs of this have been that we have, as a foundation, we have discovered that there are all kinds of creative ways for complex giving solutions that don't just involve cash. And we are able to facilitate all kinds of gifts in kind of appreciated stocks and bonds and mutual funds and securities, of real estate. And so then there's real creative government subsidized giving programs through like flow through mining shares, which lower the cost per dollar of gifts for wealthy individuals who are able to give in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That results in a very low cost of giving for those people. So the tax credits are there. It's all CRA approved, so it's no gray area stuff. We accept preferred shares of private corporations as well, and we can turn those into donations if a business is being passed on to the next generation. So all this to say, we have a whole bunch of solutions, and we are solution based, but we also take an administrative burden off the charities because we provide the tax receipt to the donor. The charity doesn't have to provide the tax receipt to the donor, but the charity still gets the donor's information. So the charity can maintain a relationship with the donor, but yeah, so I got to keep moving here. What does this have to do with affordable housing? We believe that besides mine and Tammy's desire to gather the people together and create a, some consortium, or at least networking, GiveWise could facilitate multiple aspects of this. So we could develop a charitable investment or loan scenario based on how a church wants to set some things up. We could help a church or society administrate any of the direct donations through, if there is a gift of real estate that wants to be given or some sort of non-cash gift. Churches are going, I don't like, the poor church administrators don't want to learn yet another new thing. Technology is moving so fast anyway. So we can also, yeah, facilitate those gifts of complex assets towards a project. So essentially, I put this together really quickly, but an idea I had was in a charitable investment loan. So the donor is there on the left. They make an initial donation into a GiveWise giving fund, which is very easy to set up. It's not a legal entity. It takes 5 minutes to set up an account with GiveWise. They get an immediate tax donation receipt. So what they've done is they've funded a charitable bank account. There's money there for them now to give away to a charity. They've got their immediate tax donation receipt. If you go to the next slide. So everything to the right of the big rectangle now is the idea of, oh wow, that didn't, PowerPoint, I love it. Affordable house. So let's say in the particular case of an affordable housing project, basically what happens, oh, there we go. Yes, he's correcting it on the fly. I love it. Thank you. So then what could happen? This is just an idea. There's repatriation from the revenues of the affordable housing project. So if it's almost like a charitable investment and let's say, you know, $100,000 or $200,000 is given in, then that doesn't have to be the end. If the housing project does then start to pay back that loan, they can't pay, that's been a donation. So the person can't receive money back personally. But what could happen is their GiveWise giving fund could be repatriated or and then they get a chance to give to other charities or projects as that's paid back. So it creates a cycle where somebody could thereby keep on giving from their initial donation. So that was just an idea. But I didn't solve all of your fundraising problems, but I just wanted you to know that there are Christian business people, mostly of Mennonite heritage, who did gather together, and there is that idea of, well, we don't just need it to be our particular church. If there's a church in Abbotsford that is willing to do this, there's people who are willing to do that, and there just needs to be some creativity, I think, in funding. But I just wanted to let you know that that's out there.
Thank you. Innovative understandings. Any questions, comments? So you've been at it for a while. Let's go to Brett. Yeah.
So if a church, or would you also service nonprofits, if they were hoping to receive some sort of funding, would they just sign up on the website, or how does that work from that end?
As long as the nonprofit is a registered charity in Canada, we're tied straight into the CRA database. So when someone establishes a giving fund, they can give to any of the over 86,000 charities in Canada. And the charity itself doesn't have to do anything. If a charity receives a donate, or if a GiveWise fund holder requests a grant out to a charity, that charity receives communication. We just need your banking info. We have money for you. We'll get it to you electronically. And that happens on a weekly basis.
Is there a fee that you charge then?
Charities receive 100% of the grant money. We don't charge a fee to the charities ever. Accounts under $25,000 are free to use. If you use a credit card to fund them, we just pass on the credit card fees. And then over $25,000, there's a 1% per annum charge on the account. But then the funds can be invested with, you can bring your financial advisor, you can invest them in GICs, so you can actually grow your donations. So 1% is more than covered. Used to not be covered until about a year ago. In the last year, it's really easy to grow your account over and above any fees we charge.
Any questions, comments? Anybody online? All right. Thanks very much. That's an interesting concept that we want to, yes, let's clap. Thank you very much. It's, what is it, 12:02? We're pretty close to noon. We said we would be ending at noon. So I think we will honor that. There's still the presenters here who were here in person. Talk to Dan or Joanne. Yeah, Leanne, sorry. Leanne or Lorne and other folks here from Emmanuel Church. Thank you very much for coming. We've really appreciated you being here and you presenters. All right. Have a good day.
And just one other comment. Thanks to Henry for moderating today. Very skillfully, masterfully done within 2 minutes of finishing time. And we will get the various organizations up on the MCBC website. My email has been there if you do want to connect, and if you're an individual or a church that wants to just stay connected, please send me your contact information and we'll make sure we discreetly hold that. But all the rest of the folks who presented here today will be up on the website, and Keith here is going to make sure that happens, I think, for us. So thank you so much for coming. It was great to have you all out today.